Nicholas Mosby was 42 years old. He'd spent half his life in prison. He was convicted of a series of sadistic murders. His first victim was Cora Adams. She was 13 years old. She was found skinned like a cat. The police say that she was his first victim, but the coroner says there's no way she could have been, unless this guy spent years skinning animals. His technique was perfect. There were no starter cuts, nothing to suggest that he'd hesitated in any way. I can't say for sure. All I know is that it was the first murder he confessed to, and by confessed, I mean he claimed that the devil made him do it. His second victim, a male, Michael Wayne, who was 15 years old. He'd been riding his bike home from school when Nicholas pulled over in his light blue Ford pickup truck and asked Mike if he'd be willing to earn a couple of extra bucks by helping him load some firewood. He even followed Mike to his parents' house, where Mike asked his father, who came out and met Nick and shook his hand. He patted Mike on the back, and he told Nick that he'd like him back by dinner. And when he was seen next, he was burned beyond the ability to identify him by any other means but his dental records. The following year, Mike's father, who'd become a heavy drinker, crashed his truck head-on into a tree. There were no skid marks indicating that he'd tried to stop. I consider him Nick's third victim, but the courts count Valerie Johnson, 22 years old, as Nick's third victim. Valerie worked in an animal refuge. One day a man came in and asked if the refuge could use some pet food. He said he'd had a dog, but it had run away and been hit by a car, and he wanted somewhere to give the food to. Valerie was grateful to the man, and when he asked her to help him carry the bags in, she was happy to do so. 4 days later, parts of Valerie, were found smeared along an old country road. She'd been tied to the bumper of a car, said the coroner. Nicholas had been caught on camera at this time. His fingerprints had been run. He'd formerly been in the military until he was given a medical release, so his prints were in the system. When the special units team went to arrest Nicholas, he was in his home, feeding a cut-up frozen cat to the piranha he had in a tank. He later admitted that he'd concocted a plan to be able to get rid of his victims by building a pond in his backyard and stocking it with the illegal fish. Nicholas never fully admitted to the other murders, although from time to time he'd say that he had a dream where he killed someone and gave very specific details about how and where, but he'd never given information about a name or where to find a body. I believe that this is Nicholas's way of confessing, to getting it off his chest, so to speak, without actually confessing. When he came to see me, he refused to take any personal responsibility for his crimes. He always insisted that it was Satan or the devil or the demons inside him. He demonstrated his scars on his back, which were words carved by a sharp object, and claimed them as proof that he could not have written them himself, that whatever possessed him had written them. But I can't say for certain that a man this sick hadn't gone the extra mile of dislocating his shoulder to perform these writings. He once told me that he was going to summon up the devil himself, and as he closed his eyes, he began to sway from side to side, speaking in gibberish, or what I can only assume was some language that he had invented himself. And then pretty soon he began speaking in a deep, raspy voice. It certainly sounded demonic, but I rest assured that this man, this ill man, can perform, if he so chooses, in a manner designed to fool a doctor. However, it must be noted that I could swear that I did see his eye color changed to a solid black form on one occasion However, that could likely have been the lighting. He did dislocate his thumb during one of our interviews and managed to get his handcuffs off and tried to attack me. Of course, the officers grabbed him immediately. His voice was growling as he came so close to my face I could smell his rancid breath and feel the spittle upon my face. He told me then, in that moment, that my child would be doomed to hell. At that time, I had no children, not yet at least, and I suppose he just took the gamble on thinking that if I did, he could scare me. Finally, I declared him fit for trial, and on the 4th day of October 1954, he was electrocuted until he was dead. Signed, Dr. Morris Singleton. Addition to Nicholas Mosby's case dated the 6th day of October 1954. Just 2 days after Nicholas had been put to death, strange thing, my wife and I had a son, born October 5th. As sure as I'm sitting here, I could swear to you that his eyes turned the same color of coal black that Mr. Moby's had turned to during our interview. I know it seems unfeasible, almost impossible, but I fear that somehow I may have unleashed whatever it was that Nicholas Mosby claimed to have possessing him. That was the last known note in Nicholas Mosby's file, and 12 years later, Mr. and Mrs. Singleton died when their home caught on fire. It was deemed arson. Luckily, their son Samuel escaped with his life and went to live with his paternal grandparents. There is nothing further known of Samuel, as his grandparents changed his name. Thank you for coming to my channel, and if you like this story, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already and you'd like to be, please subscribe, and also click that bell if you'd like to be notified of my new content as soon as it goes up. If you'd like to support this channel, please consider becoming a Patreon member. The link is below in the description. Thank you.